Okay, let's go over this UML first. Our UML says that we have to make an address class as well as a customer class. Within our address class, we need to create variables street number, street name, state, as displayed right here. They're going to be public, and they're going to be of this data type. And we're going to be setting getters and setters for these, which I will explain later on why we are doing that. And we are creating a public address method. It has empty parameters, and within this method I am going to be getting my getter and setter value and I'm going to go ahead and set it to 0 and empty until my user has given me information. And once I have been given information, I'm going to be using my public address method with parameters, and I'm going to list them within the parentheses, and I'm going to be setting my getter and setter values that I have received from my user and set them equal to this parameter value that I will be using within my main. And just like address, we have set public variables, and I have named them appropriately for their data type, and date time is of data type date time as displayed right here. And this will be functioning just like address. I'm going to be getting my information for this specific variable from my user, and I'm going to be setting that value. And I went ahead and set the variables equal to empty, and then right here, if you will remember, in our address class we had all of this information already described in our address class. So instead of writing it out again, I am just going to call my address class, and I'm going to call that connection between my address class and customer class address. And you'll see down here within our public, if we'll look at our GUI over here, our public set address is going to be void. So that's why I have that void right there. And within the parameters, I'm going to have all these values that I had already gained from my address class, and I'm going to use my connection that I've made up here to address class, and I'm going to say, hey, look in address class, that variable called street number, which was right here that I have received from my user and I've set it, I am going to be using that within my customer class. So I'm making that connection right here. I'm setting through my connection the appropriate variable, and I am going to set that value equal to the parameter. And birth date, datetime.now, that just means as of now. And within our, if we look at our GUI again, our public customer with parameter has 3 variables that it needs, and it's 2 strings and a date time, first name, last name, and birth date. And I'm going to go ahead and say the getter and setter that I've received, the information that I've received from my user, I'm going to be setting it to this parameter. So my parameter is going to equal the value I've received. And then in this method right here, if we'll look at our GUI, it's public, it's of type int, and we are calculating age. So in order to do that, I've made a variable called age, and I've set it to data type int, and I have said datetime.now.year. So that means now year subtract birth date.year. So this is the value I've received from my customer, and I'm going to be calculating their age as of right now through this line, and then I'm going to return that value, that answer I received from my calculation, and I'm going to store it into calculate age method. Or not necessarily stored, I guess. It was just I'm calling my method and I'm going to do this calculation and then I'm going to return a value. So if we look at our GUI, again, we have public set address, and it's going to have these parameters inside, and it's going to be void. And if you look here, I've done just that, and once again, I have made that connection right here, and I'm saying through that connection in this variable zip code that was described in my connection right here, I'm going to set that equal to I'm going to set this equal to my parameter zip code. And then the last one is public. It's of type string and is called toString. And this is just saying I'm returning whenever I'll explain this whenever I go into my main, but I am calling this method and then I am returning this string, which is last name, comma, first name, and then in parentheses, calculate age, which will be returning my age from this calculation. So if we move on to main, we will see that we're working with WPF right now, so that's why this is right here. And what I've done is, here's my GUI. I'm sorry, I don't know if I've been calling this GUI or not, but this is a UML. It's not a GUI. This is a GUI. And for example, customer's name, I've said first name, last name, and if we go to customer, we will see that I have set up to where I can get my customer first name, last name, and set it into my variable. So that's what's happening right here. And the same thing over here, but that's all in my address. And birthday is going to be along with my birth date right here. And then I just lost where I was. Oh, I wasn't in there. Okay. And then once I have all of this information, I am going to get it and I'm going to store it into my appropriate variables. And to do that, to store them, I'm going to click the load button and it's going to populate all of that information into this little list box right here. So in order to get to here, you can either double click, or for right now I'm just going to go over here because I've already made this method. But whenever you double click that button, it's going to populate this method right here. And I've named that button load click. So that means whenever this load button is clicked, go into this method. So I've made a few note comments right here so you guys can maybe understand a little bit better of what's going on. But right here I'm saying customer class equal new customer. I am saying make the connection between customer class, and I'm going to call it customer class just to make it a little bit easier to understand, hopefully. And right here I'm saying in my first name text box, I've called it right here, I'm saying in text box first name dot text, so that's saying in this text box, look at the text. If it's not equal to nothing, move on. So this is saying if there is some value, like first name I would put Enigma, and then last name I would put Arch, And this is where it would say this, look inside this text box last name right here, text, if it says nothing, or if this checkbox is checked equals true, which is if it is checked, then continue. And the rest of this follows exactly what I've just explained. But I will go over since we have gone over value text, which is string, the string right here, if it is not empty, move on. We're going to look right here because if you will remember, our street num, which is street number, it's of int data type. So I am not looking for a string, an empty string, or an empty string. I'm looking to see if something is true or false, which is if text box street num, which is right here, text box street num dot text is an integer, then output integer street num. So that is saying, hey, if this isn't a string, or if it isn't a double, then output this value street num. And this all works the exact same. I've just nested my if statements to go along with, to keep going in like a specific order. And date of birth text box, which is right here. Date of birth text box, I'm looking right here. If it's not empty, move on. So it says, if this isn't empty, do what's in this within this if statement. So that connection that I've made to my customer class, I'm going to call that connection. So I'm reaching inside my customer class and I'm saying that variable that's called first name, equal it to first name dot text. So that's going to be saying I'm reaching into my customer class and I'm saying this variable right here that's called first name, set it equal to the text that my user has given me within this text box. And last name is the exact same. And customer birth date, I'm making that connection to customer class and I'm saying that variable called birth date, that text that is within text box date of birth, convert that string that I have been given into date time format. Well, the user should be giving it to me in date time format, but it's going to convert it to date time variable type. And once I have received all that information, I'm saying the text box first name, text box last name, text box date of birth, clear that information. I don't want to see it once I've clicked load. I want my information to be populated within my list box right here. And that's whenever I said clear. Right after I clear that info, I'm going to say listbox.items.add, which means I want to add stuff to this list box, and the stuff I want to add is from the connection customer class, which is class customer, and it's going to output this string right here that I mentioned earlier. It's going to output last name, first name, calculate age. And so I'm once again making that connection to customer class, within customer class, the variable address, I'm making that connection to customer class, and within address variable, I'm going to set, okay, let's go. Customer class within address dot street number, save what I have what is within street number or street num, which is right here. That is that try parse that I used earlier to see if my user has given me an integer value, and if they have, good. I'm putting it into this variable called street num. So I'm setting right here, and I'm going to go ahead and clear that text box because I don't want to see that information once I'm done. And all of this follows that exact same path that I've just described within this text block, code block. And basically, so you know how this if is asking, hey, if text box date of birth is not empty, move on. But if it's not, then we're doing an else statement, and we're saying, please retype customer date of birth. So this is saying, if I don't have my information for this specific text box, don't move on. Make them put the right information in. And that's what all these other else statements follow. So the retype customer first name, that is saying if text box first name.text is not equal to nothing, if this if statement isn't right, then I'm going to go down to this else statement right here, and I'm going to make them put their first name in because I haven't received appropriate information. I'm going to type Enigma, and then I'm going to put Arch as my last name. And let's just go ahead and leave street number text box empty and see what happens. So what happened was my if statement was invalid, so it shot down to my else statement, which brought up this message right here, and it's saying please retype customer street number. You didn't type anything, it needs something. So I'm going to type some numbers, and I'm going to type some string values. And this is my date time that I'm going to put, and it says last name. If we'll go over to customer, where our string was right here, it's saying last name, comma, first name, parenthesis, calculate age. And it has done that just right there. So we can do another name like Bob, and let's say Bob does not have a last name. Let's go ahead and put a number right here and see what happens. I think you guys can, well, I'll go ahead and reiterate. So my if statement was incorrect. My value I have in this text box was not of string value. So I shot down to my else statement and said, hey, you gotta retype some stuff because this isn't of the right type. So I'm gonna type some letters. and it's saying first name Bob. Okay, well, Bob didn't have a last name, so we just didn't output last name. We skipped that, comma, first name, and age.